welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it.
Betty Montgomery is president of Montgomery Consulting Group and the attorney of counsel at Montgomery and Schuster, assisting clients with regulatory compliance concerns. She was Ohio's first woman attorney general and the first woman auditor of the state. She drafted Ohio's first living will law, victims' rights law, and brownfields legislation. Betty is a member of the State Medical Board of Ohio and the chair of the Joanne Davidson Ohio Leadership Institute. She received a bachelor degree from Bowling Green State University and a law degree from the University of Toledo. Welcome, Betty.
Welcome, Betty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Michelle.
So your career has been very inspirational, and I was hoping you could give just a quick snapshot of how you got started in politics to begin with.
It runs in the family. My grandmother was a very active Republican chair in a county in Pennsylvania, Blair County, and very active as the chair, the women's chair. And so we've always had a sense in the family that, you know, you have an obligation to give back as part of your citizen role. And so I started, if you will, in public. I didn't intend when I started to be in politics, I intended to be in public service. And some might see those as distinct. And in some instances they are. But for me, I decided to go to law school. And when I went to law school, I ultimately decided I wanted to be in a prosecutor's office. I always knew I wanted to be a public lawyer. I didn't want to solve problems and charge people. Tell people, yes, I understand you have a problem, but it'll cost you before I can help you. So I only wanted to be in the public sector. And, you know, for all of your listeners, it's really important to take a job that you have and don't just shake hands with it and look over its shoulder, but do the job you have. And so I worked really hard as a juvenile prosecutor. I didn't want to be the juvenile prosecutor. I wanted to be a real prosecutor. But sometimes the good Lord gives you what you need, not what you want. And I worked very hard at that. And so when events happened where last minute the existing county prosecutor decided that he no longer wanted to run, and he didn't tell anyone until a couple of days before filing deadline. And then as soon as he announced he wasn't running, his brother-in-law, a Democrat, jumped in. I'm a Republican, a governing Republican. And to make distinctions from other Republicans that we're now dealing with. So what happened was they didn't have, the Republican Party in Wood County didn't have a candidate for the county prosecutor's office. And they only had a couple of days. The county chair, who was somebody I knew, somebody I had done some volunteer work for because he had run for governor. And I didn't do an enormous amount, but he knew me, knew my work. And so he called me. Friday, he learned he didn't have a candidate. Saturday morning, I got a call, and I said, "Yes, I'll be glad to run." By Monday, I had somebody running against me because there were no other women prosecutors in the state, and there are 88 county prosecutors, and there were no women. But I got through that primary pretty well, and obviously ran a really tough race, and ultimately won in the fall.
So
that's how I.
So how did your role there prepare you for your other roles?
Interestingly, Michelle, I think when I say you shouldn't just shake hands with your job and look over its shoulder for something more important. I mean, when you work hard at a job, and when I was working hard as a juvenile prosecutor, it required me to, anybody who knows about the juvenile law in Ohio, the charge is brought and you have a trial within, or at least when I was the juvenile prosecutor, within 10 days of the charge. So you had to work very hard to get your evidence together. And so you were learning, and you had high volume. So, because I was the only full-time prosecutor in the prosecutor's office. And so I had a big volume of cases. and I had to get all the witnesses together. I had to examine the facts. I had to know. So you learn your job and then try the case. Most of them pled, but then you had some that tried. So that prepared me as I went from juvenile prosecutor to county prosecutor, because I knew, being the only full-time prosecutor in that office, what not to do. Because as much as I loved my colleagues, they were prosecuting on the cheap. They were overcharging, in my opinion, were overcharging to get somebody to enter a plea to a lesser, so they didn't have to try the case, because they were also in private practice. So, and they indicted from police reports, which is never what you should do. You should always talk to your witnesses, because police reports only give you a two-dimensional look at your case. And if you want to do justice by the victims of the crime, as well as the defendants, to make sure that you're charging it correctly, or there shouldn't be a charge, you have to be thorough. So I learned a lot when I was juvenile prosecutor. I came in when I was elected county prosecutor. I converted the office to full time, and put into place the rules that I thought was really important for justice in our system, at least in Wood County. So it prepared me then for. I went from county prosecutor to the legislature. Well, it was perfect position of marriage of gathering facts and worrying about public policy and persuasion, and all of the things that I had learned, all the mistakes that I had made, helped me be a better legislator, I think, and to be thorough and to be trusted by my colleagues. Then when I ran for attorney general, I knew enough people. I learned very quickly that if you want to be successful, you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, and people who have skill sets you may not have. And you have to understand that success doesn't happen alone. It's not a miracle. You stand on the shoulders of many people, particularly when you're an elected, because as an elected, you don't get elected unless you have a lot of campaign people working for you, and you have good, solid people advising you, and you learn that winning is a collaborative, important, if you will, sport. You can't win without a lot of people. And by working collaboratively, as I had in the legislature and as I had with my detectives as county prosecutor, um, that experience really served me very well.
So, what do you consider the highlights of your career so far?
I loved every job I had. I can't accept one. I didn't dislike it. It just wasn't creative enough for me, and that was when I was auditor of state. But there were wonderful people that did a wonderful job, and I loved the management part of side of it. But I think, it's really hard question, because I loved every job. I guess being attorney general was the highlight, but uh, quite frankly, I loved being every job I had. I loved, because I met good people. I learned a lot. I thought I could help, do justice as much as I could best judge. So I loved them all. I suppose the AG would probably be the highlight, but Attorney General.
Being in Trailblazing Women in Politics project that's being released by a PBS special and Green University, there's a vast amount of different types of women and careers that are being highlighted in that project, and yours being included. What extra challenges do women in politics face today?
And this is just my bias, I think that women have two things that, at least a couple of things that they have to learn. They have to learn, you get invited to a lot of fights. You don't have to accept all the invitations. You have to pick your fights. You have to pick the issues that are important, and not get engaged in the small stuff, because you're still dealing with the vast majority are men. And and with all due respect, if a woman is constantly talking, jabberwalking, complaining about this or it, it. And this is my bias, and I realize it's a very broad statement. But I think men, I think it's very true that women and men speak a different language, and we come at issues differently. Either we can argue the nature nurture, we can argue experience, why that is, doesn't matter. It means that I think when men hear women complaining, their voice is high and complaining about small stuff, they don't hear that. That's just goes one ear out of the other. It's like mom telling you to make your bed. And so you have to lower your voice. That's an odd thing to say, but lower your voice, step back, and pick your fight, and then make your irrational argument, make your concern addressed in as unemotional way as possible. Because I think what happens is the men, and at this point we're still dealing with a lot of majority of men are just hearing their mom telling them to pick up their dirty socks. That it's that level, and we have to understand that men hear differently than women, because this is again very broad, because we are socialized differently, and at least I believe. And so I think that to be perceived as a credible person in whatever role you have to be prepared, and you have to pick your battles. And the other thing you have to do, which women I don't think do as well at all, is you have to be willing to risk. We are by definition, and excuse me, by condition, oftentimes not willing to risk. Why is that? Because we are the homemakers, because we have children to worry about, we have parents to worry about, we have a lot of things that jumping off that cliff could affect in ways that, at least our society today, although it's getting better, much better, is still a responsibility of a woman. And we just, because we have what we perceive to be so much to risk, and because we frankly haven't been socialized into the fact that, yes, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. It You'll find that men get to be at the head of the line a lot. I always make this comparison. You know, here is a job description. Here is my resume. For a man, well, I can do that. Look, see, I can do that. It doesn't have to fit four square, because it's the skill set that you're, as much as the experience that you're looking for. But for a woman, when we look at a job description, oftentimes we think that the resume has to quite, fit every four corners of the resume, it has to fit the job description. Well, we know, every coach knows, every sport coach knows, that you take the talent you have, the experience you have, and the job ends up being molded around that oftentimes. I realize that there are KPIs, the things you have to deliver, but everyone is looking for you need a certain skill set. Depends on who you're working with, what the issues are. So I think for the most part, it's women have to understand that they're still working in a pretty much a male dominated society, and you sort of have to figure out how to, if they're speaking Italian, don't get mad when you're speaking French. Figure out what the mutual language is, and then pick your fights.
I totally agree. We do a lot of reputation management. We also do a lot of key messaging. Is exactly correct. If you don't know your audience, they can't hear you. You're not on the
Yeah.
same. So agreed. And so that being said, you've been in politics for a long time. You've seen a lot of different women in today's politics. Do you see a lot of missteps, or do you feel like women are on the right track when it comes to that?
Oh, I think I see a lot of talented women in many different roles. Um, I think it helps. I had two older brothers, so you learn to speak French if you were always speaking Italian. you learn because big brothers have a way of teaching little sisters a lot of things. So I think we're making a lot of progress, and I think there's a heightened awareness on all sides about differences that are not deficiencies, but just differences. Um, so I think generally, I still I still sort of shake my head. And by the way, I've made all these mistakes. I hopefully have learned from some of them. I still make those mistakes, but being able to be well prepared, unemotional, and um, speaking in a professional way in the atmosphere that you're in makes you credible. And if you want to get something done, you've got to be credible. And then occasionally you are going to have to accept the fight. You're going to have to accept the invitation to the fight. You just want to make sure it's the right invitation to accept.
And how would someone discern that?
Well, for me, for example, in my roles, you're not going to fight with me about if you bully me. There's no fight. The invitation is accepted, and I'm going to tell you my job is to do justice in many instances. My job is to do as best I can to perceive justice on all parties' side. And if you think you're going to bully me into something, there's an invitation I'm going to accept, and I'm going to explain to you that this is my role, these are the facts, this is my conclusion, and you're not going to bully me about it. You can fill me in on facts I don't. You can dispute the facts. You can dispute the fact that I may not have all the facts, and my job is to listen. But at the end of the day, you're not just going to roll over me or threaten me or tell me if I do this and the consequence is going to be there'll be consequences to you that are political or whatever, because you still have to work with integrity, and you still have to maintain this sense of right and wrong, and not worry. I mean, I can remember a case when I was attorney general, and I was being bullied by some pretty high powered folks nationally about a particular case. And I told them, you can do all this, you can threaten me politically, you can tell me there'll be consequences politically if I don't do this and don't assign a certain lawyer to this case or whatever. But I'm not going to do it. And you're not going to bully me into that. I am going to do what I think is right for Ohio and for the constituents who elected me. That was a fight I invited, an invitation I accepted, because if you have a sense of, as best you can, a true north, and you constantly measure yourself against that, then you can't go wrong. Even if there are consequences, you still can't go wrong. Though, if the door closes here, there's going to be an opening somewhere else, but you've still acted with integrity.
I totally agree. And I think sometimes it's hard when, small businesses are trying to run their businesses. And sometimes you get someone who threatens to do certain things on social media. If you don't do what I say, or I'm going to, make up stories or bad reviews. And it's holding somebody hostage. I mean, that's not really what that was intended,
And of course, I'm not speaking from the business sense as much. And so we all have to find our way into that integrity. And it doesn't mean that you're not creative about it. It doesn't mean that you don't talk to crisis management people. It doesn't mean that you find ways to deal with that. And again, one of the things we're seeing in the atmosphere today is that compromise is somehow being compromised. Now, in the political world, by definition, in a democracy, the way our founders found us, everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a right to an opinion, and they're equal. Now, may not be equally informed, but everybody has a right. And so by definition, our founders intended that there would be compromise. So sometimes, yes, indeed, your group creates a camel with 5 legs. It's not maybe the most efficient. It may not be the right way to do it, but it is a way that moves your issue forward. It is a way in which you at least get partially done what needs to be done. So in the business sense, when you're getting bullied or doesn't mean that sometimes you need to uh, make some adjustments. A compromise is not necessarily being compromised. The hard part is figuring out when that line is drawn that becomes a compromise to yourself and your business or your person in a way that um, is really a step too far.
Understand.
Very hard.
Throughout your career, what has been the biggest obstacle you had to overcome?
I think the obstacles are not always obvious. When I was in law school and back in the 70s and 80s, of course, you were dealing with the fact that you're a woman. And that, my criminal law professors took the handful of women we had and made us define the sex terms out loud, stand